At my final job interview before college, my future boss laughed and said, "Dreamers like you light up briefly and are forgotten just as fast." I thanked him for his time. 50 years later, as his descendants fought in court over the last shreds of his estate, mine founded a city that carried my family name across continents, across oceans, while his was erased by rain, rot, and silence. The day Ernest McCaskill laughed in my face, I felt something inside me snap. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. Something harder. It was June 17th, 1975. I remember because it was the hottest day of the year in Abilene, Texas. One of those days where the sky looks white instead of blue, and every breath feels like breathing through a wool blanket. I had walked 2 miles in that heat, wearing my best shirt, because my parents' car was broken again. I was 18, about to start college in the fall. The first in my family. My parents worked jobs most people don't even notice: cleaning offices at night, loading trucks before sunrise. They had worked themselves raw, just to give me a shot at something better. I walked into McCaskill Construction's main office, sweaty but trying not to show it. Sat across from Ernest McCaskill himself. He didn't even offer me a water. He looked over my thin little resume, like he was reading the back of a cereal box. "You're applying for general laborer?" He asked, like it physically hurt him to say the words. "Yes, sir," I said. "But I want to learn. Anything you can teach me." He leaned back, smirking. "Learn, huh?" I nodded. I told him about my plans. College. Construction management. Starting my own company someday. Maybe even something big. That's when he laughed. Loud and long. He wiped his eyes and said the words I would never forget. "Dreamers like you light up briefly and are forgotten just as fast." He said it like he was doing me a favor, ripping off the Band-Aid early. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I forced them still. I thanked him. I meant it too. Because right then, right there, Ernest McCaskill gave me the greatest gift he ever could. A mission. I walked out of that office back into the boiling heat. Each step across that gravel lot felt heavier than the last. But I wasn't broken. I was forged. I went to school that fall. Texas State University. Slept in the cheapest dorm on campus. Ate ramen and day-old bagels. Took every job I could find: washing dishes, pumping gas, painting houses, anything to cover the bills. I studied construction, engineering, and business with a hunger no one else seemed to have. While my classmates were chasing girls and partying on Fridays, I was in the library. While they were sleeping in, I was at job sites asking foremen if I could watch and learn for free. People said I was too serious. That I was missing out. I wasn't missing anything. I had a fire to feed. Graduated in 1979 with honors, no student debt. All I had was a duffel bag of clothes, a second-hand Chevy Nova, and a hunger that hadn't cooled at all. First job was at Brody & Sons Construction out of Dallas. Small firm. Rough people. Hard hats and harder language. I didn't care. I kept my head down. Listened more than I talked. Learned how to read blueprints, negotiate contracts, manage crews, solve problems on the fly. I also learned something else. Most people didn't fail because they weren't smart. They failed because they were lazy. Because when it got hard, they quit. I didn't. In 1984, 5 years into the grind, I made the biggest decision of my life. I quit. Took every dollar I had, about $8,000, and started Ralston Development out of a rusty trailer on the edge of a cornfield in Denton, Texas. First, we built fences, patios, storage sheds, whatever we could. Some nights I slept in that trailer because I couldn't afford rent anywhere else. Some nights I wondered if Ernest McCaskill was right after all. But every time doubt crept in, I pushed harder. Word got around that we were honest, that we finished jobs on time, that we didn't cut corners. By 1987, we were landing small commercial projects. By 1992, we were putting up entire apartment complexes. Every building we finished was another brick laid in the wall between me and Ernest McCaskill's laughter. In 1998, Texas real estate crashed hard. Banks collapsed. Loans dried up. Construction projects got abandoned halfway finished. I thought we were finished too. I mortgaged everything to keep Ralston Development alive: my truck, my trailer, even the small rental house I lived in. I thought of Ernest a lot during those nights, sleeping under my desk, staring at the ceiling. Then the news started spreading around town. McCaskill Construction had gone under. Turns out Ernest had gambled everything on a big riverboat casino project in Louisiana. It fell through. He lost his shirt. His house up on the hill was repossessed. His cars were auctioned off. His wife divorced him. His kids scattered. Last I heard, he was living in a trailer park outside Odessa, drinking himself stupid. Nobody mentioned him anymore. It was like he had never existed. Meanwhile, I kept clawing. One job at a time. One block at a time. By 2005, Ralston Development wasn't just a company, it was a machine. Hotels, hospitals, shopping centers, whole neighborhoods. That same year, a brand new town outside Phoenix asked if we wanted to put our name on it. Ralston, Arizona. It felt right. Not for me. For every poor kid who ever got laughed at. For every dreamer who was told they'd be forgotten. And it wasn't just Arizona. By 2015, we had projects in Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Florida, even outside the country. Schools, parks, highways, all carrying the Ralston name. In 2025, 50 years almost to the day after that job interview, I got a call from a lawyer in Abilene. The McCaskill family was fighting in court over what was left of Ernest's estate. Scraps, really. A broken-down farmhouse. A few pieces of worthless land. Some old debts. I didn't need to be there, but I went anyway. Sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, anonymous, just another old man in a suit. I watched his grandchildren, kids Ernest never even lived to meet, clawing at each other over pennies. When the hearing ended, I walked through town. The McCaskill offices? Boarded up. Windows smashed. Weeds waist-high. The rain had just passed, leaving everything damp and gray. I stood there a long time, staring at the ruins. Dreamers like you light up briefly, and are forgotten just as fast, he had said. Maybe he was right, but he forgot something. Some dreams catch fire and don't burn out. They burn forever. I thought that would be the end of it. Standing there in the wet parking lot, looking at what was left of McCaskill's legacy, I figured I had closed the book. But life doesn't like clean endings. About 2 months later, I got another call. This time from my lawyer. Turns out, one of the McCaskill great-grandsons, a slick young man named Travis, had filed a lawsuit against me. Said I had stolen business opportunities from his grandfather back in the 80s. Said Ralston Development wouldn't exist if not for McCaskill Construction's downfall. It was a stretch. A desperate, stupid move. But lawsuits are funny things. Even when you're innocent, you still bleed money and time fighting them. I wasn't worried about losing. I was furious about the insult. After all these years, after building everything with my own 2 hands, after sacrificing everything, they still thought they could drag me down. And Travis wasn't the only one. His sister Callie jumped in too. She started talking to reporters. Said I took advantage of their family's collapse. Painted me as some cold, ruthless businessman. I hadn't spoken about Ernest McCaskill publicly once in 50 years. Now they were dragging my name through the mud like I was the villain. It wasn't just noise either. The story started picking up steam online. Old rivals and bitter ex-employees came crawling out of the woodwork, throwing in their 2 cents. Ralston Development stock dipped. Board members started whispering. Big contracts got put on hold. It felt like 1998 all over again, back when one wrong move could have sunk me. Only this time, I wasn't the scrappy kid anymore. I was the empire. And I wasn't about to let a couple of spoiled descendants tear it down. I told my lawyers to dig. Not just into the lawsuit, into the McCaskill family itself. I wanted every skeleton in every closet. It didn't take long. Turns out Travis had a gambling problem. Huge debts in Vegas. Creditors breathing down his neck. Callie wasn't much better. Multiple bankruptcies. A trail of shady consulting gigs that looked a lot like fraud. They weren't angry about justice. They were desperate for money. And when desperate people go hunting, they don't care who they wound. We hit back. Hard. My lawyers filed countersuits for defamation, slander, and harassment. We subpoenaed bank records, credit reports, even old emails. When the documents came out, it was like throwing a bucket of blood into a shark tank. Reporters who had been sniffing for a scandal about me suddenly turned on Travis and Callie. Headlines changed overnight. McCaskill Descendants accused of fraud, extortion scheme against Ralston Development. The board stopped whispering. The contracts came off hold. The stock rebounded. But it wasn't enough for me. Not yet. I didn't just want to win. I wanted it finished. I wanted the McCaskill name buried so deep it would never claw its way back into daylight again. There was still one piece of land the McCaskill family owned. The last piece of the old estate. 30 acres of overgrown scrubland outside Abilene. Worth almost nothing. But it had sentimental value. It was the last thing tying their name to this town. I made an offer through a shell company, pennies on the dollar. They were too desperate to say no. A week later, I held the deed in my hand. I stood on that land, dry grass crunching under my boots, staring at the crooked remains of an old McCaskill family sign swinging in the wind. That night, bulldozers rolled in. We leveled the land flat. The next month, we broke ground. A new Ralston Community Center. A library. A playground. All bearing the Ralston name. There would be no trace of McCaskill left. Not even a ghost. I thought it was over. The land was mine. The lawsuits were crushed. The McCaskill name was dead and buried. But something was still gnawing at me. In the middle of all the paperwork for that 30-acre buyout, my lawyer flagged something strange, a set of old letters attached to the original land deed. Most of it was the usual nonsense, dusty tax records, old surveys, but at the bottom of the stack was a manila envelope, sealed up tight. Inside were a dozen handwritten letters between Ernest McCaskill and someone named W.R. The first one started simple. W.R., the boy's stubborn but smart. Might be more use to us than we thought. First, I didn't understand. But as I kept reading, the story unraveled. W.R. wasn't some business partner. It was Walter Ralston, my own grandfather. A man I barely knew. A man my parents never talked about. Turns out, Ernest and Walter had a dirty little history. Decades before I ever walked into McCaskill's office for that job interview, my grandfather and Ernest had worked together on land deals, crooked ones. Kickbacks, bribes, fake contracts. And then when the feds started sniffing around, Ernest ratted him out. Walter Ralston lost everything. Disgraced. Bankrupt. Dead by 1961 when I was still in diapers. My whole life, I had thought our family had just been poor. Turns out we had been crushed. By McCaskill. And maybe, just maybe, that job interview wasn't random at all. Maybe Ernest had known exactly who I was when I sat down in that chair. Maybe laughing in my face wasn't just cruelty. Maybe it was revenge. I stared at those letters for a long time that night. Everything felt different. The anger. The fire I had carried for 50 years. It wasn't just about a stupid interview anymore. It wasn't just pride. It was blood. I hadn't just been fighting for my own name. I had been fighting to dig my whole family's name out of a grave McCaskill had shoved us into decades before I was even born. And now, finally, the scales were even. No, they were tipped. McCaskill's bloodline was in ruins. Ralston was carved into steel, stone, and history. But deep down, I knew something ugly. I hadn't really beaten Ernest. I had become him. Ruthless. Unforgiving. And maybe just as forgotten. When the dust finally settled, 2 weeks after I found the letters, a new storm hit. Not from the McCaskills. From inside my own walls. My youngest son, Mark, blindsided me. Mark had always been the visionary, the risk-taker, the one who wanted to move Ralston Development into crypto, NFTs, tech startups, all things I didn't understand and didn't trust. He thought the old ways were dying. He thought I was dying. Turns out he had been quietly pulling investors into a side project, using the Ralston name, without my approval. When the board found out, it split the company down the middle. Half wanted to follow Mark into the shiny new future. Half stayed loyal to me. It wasn't just a business fight. It was a family war. And this time, I wasn't sure if I had the stomach to fight my own blood the way I had fought McCaskill. Because if I did, there might be nothing left of me when it was over. I spent weeks thinking, watching, waiting. Mark wasn't just trying to build his own empire, he was trying to tear mine down to do it. He held secret meetings with investors. He leaked plans to the press. He whispered to board members that I was too old, too stubborn, too slow for this new world. First, I told myself it was just ambition, that it wasn't personal. But late one night I saw it plain. In a leaked email Mark had written, "Dad was good for a while. But guys like him, they burn out fast. Get out of the way or get run over." Those words hit harder than Ernest McCaskill's ever had. Because they weren't from a stranger. They were from my own son. I called an emergency board meeting. No notice. No lawyers. No spin. Just me, Mark, and the men and women who had helped build Ralston Development from the dirt. I laid it all out. The secret deals. The betrayal. The lies. Mark fought back hard. Called me an old relic. Said I was too blinded by the past to see the future. For a moment the room felt split right down the middle. I looked at the faces around me, old friends, young sharks, and I realized something. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was a relic. But I wasn't dead yet. I pulled out a final piece of paper, my ace. A private clause buried in the company charter from back in 1984. It gave me absolute tie-breaking power in the event of a leadership split. But only if invoked by the founder personally. No board vote. No negotiation. Just one voice, mine. I invoked it. The room fell silent. Mark's face drained of color. He realized too late what it meant. He was out. Fired. Disinherited. Gone. I had won. The next weeks felt hollow. Ralston Development stayed strong. The stock soared. New contracts rolled in. But my phone stayed silent. No calls from Mark. No birthdays.
No holidays.
My own blood gone like smoke. I heard he moved out to California. Started some tech startup. Still using the Ralston name, but now he had to put former in front of it. As for me, I stayed in Texas. Built more. Bigger. Higher. But at night, alone in the big house, I thought about that kid who had walked into Ernest McCaskill's office 50 years ago. About how he had been laughed at. About how he had made a promise he had kept. But at what cost? I had erased the McCaskill name from the map. Built monuments to the Ralston name across oceans, across continents. But somehow, in chasing revenge, I had become a man even my own son wanted to forget. And maybe, just maybe, Ernest McCaskill had died the same way. Alone. Surrounded by everything he built. Remembered by no one.